Morning, Aston Villa fans. It's the morning after the night before where Liverpool 2, Aston Villa nil. And I really just wanted to come on for a very quick podcast today to do a small bit of analysis, just because there's something that's been kind of it's been parroted, I think, in post match commentary and a lot on Twitter, and it seems to be really about previous three games, teams went long against Liverpool, and why didn't Villa go long against Liverpool? Now, number one, I suppose really we got to take into account that it's not Villa's it's not Villa's style to go long. Whether you agree with that or not is completely understandable. But I wanted to take a little look at this because I've gone back and I've looked at a tactical analysis, I suppose, of the last three games the Liverpool played: one against Brentford, against Man United, and against Chelsea. And I just wanted to highlight what I feel the tweaks and changes that Liverpool made to make it more difficult for teams just to play those balls forward. But before that, what I want to do is I want to take a little look at how Aston Villa played, and with regards to specifically those long balls that Aston Villa may or may not have played against Liverpool yesterday. So I just want to share up some stats here from our friends at Who Scored, if this is going to allow me to do. It does. One moment there now, just while I get myself sorted and make sure that I can see everything here on the screen. So what I've done here is what you can see here on the screen is you can see Aston Villa's pass map here for their long shots, or their long excuse me, their long passes which were chipped into the final third and were played forward. So what we can see here is everything in blue is Aston Villa. So Aston Villa played 48 long passes in this game. Now, obviously, that would include Emi Martinez when he had the ball at his feet, chipping that ball out to the sideline to Matty Cash and to Luka Dean. So what I've also marked this down as well is I've gone for chipped passes, obviously, because we don't want the ground passes. I wanted to get passes that were forward and passes that were into the final third. So what we have here is the map of Aston Villa's passes that were passed into the final third. And, Who Scored is actually great because you can see here, the direction of the passes like this. And I know people will have their pass maps done probably later on today, and they're brilliant to have. I just don't have the facility to do that. I don't know how to do that. So we can see here where all the passes went to, and the directions that they went. Like just these two here were made in the last 5 minutes of the game. Luka Deal plays this one in the first minute of the game, down the line over one of the fullbacks. Tyrone Mings plays one there in the 87th minute. So it's not exactly fruitful. So we didn't play an awful lot of chipped balls forward or long passes forward. Excuse me. Now, why might that have been the case? Before we go and we look at why that might have been the case, let's take a little look at what the previous teams would have what their passes looked like, should I say. So let's go back and look at Brentford. So just for context here, what we can see is that Brentford, if this wants to share up, and seems to be having issues sharing on the screen. I do apologize if I'm lagging behind for anybody. Even though this is pre-recorded, I don't think I'll get it much better. Here we have Brentford's situation. Brentford made 288 passes in the whole game. Of those 288, 64 of them were long, which is more than we played. But 40 of those passes were chipped. 236 were forward passes. 144 into the final third. But these are the actual chipped balls that went forward. And when you click on these here, you can see a lot of those were down into the channels. As you can see here, there was crossfield ball here from Vitaly Janlet. There was a ball right into the corner here from Matthias Jensen. I would imagine in the 89th minute, they were playing for time in that instance there. We have Vitaly Janlet trying to find, I would imagine, the left winger down that side as well, Jordan Henderson as well. So it looks like they're playing a lot of those crossfield diagonal balls, as you would expect. But once again, the amount of passes that went forward, chip passes that went forward, is not amazingly different to what we have seen to what we saw for Aston Villa. Also, once again, just to look here at which one will I pick next? At the United game, because I think this one sticks out in a lot of people's minds. So here is the Manchester United game. If it wants to share up for me. Let me add this to stage. And apologies if this is lagging. So the Man United passes. This is an interesting one because they're all really concentrated in one area of the field, which you can see here. And when you click on these passes, you can see Bruno Fernandes here actually makes a long pass. That's one long pass there in the 62nd minute. Mateus Cunha. So they're overloading those diagonal balls as you would expect. Here right into the corners to try and find their wingers. Mason Mount plays one forward there, the straight ball. But look, we're trying to get the balls in behind the fullbacks. So I have the Chelsea information here as well. But you guys get them. You guys get the premise, I think, of what I'm trying to show here. They were overloading. They were trying to find space in behind the fullbacks. And why were they doing that? Because if we look, I suppose, really at the setup of the Liverpool team previously, and this might go a small little bit. No, I might actually do all together. I'll share my entire screen here because this might make things easier to see. Now we have our whole screen here, and I'll try and make this one slightly bigger here so you guys can see. So these are the positional maps of players in the game yesterday. The one at the bottom is Liverpool versus Aston Villa. And I wanted to show that and pay attention to our 12 and 26 lineup. Pay attention to the spacing between the strikers and between the midfield area as well here, and how compact Liverpool made it. And what I want to do is I want to get you guys to take a look at the very top one here. You can see my cursor here. The three parts at the top there show the Chelsea game, the United game, and the Brentford game. And what I wanted to highlight here was the Chelsea game. For me, you can see the way that Liverpool set up. Yes, their fullbacks were back in traditional fullback positions. You've got the three main kind of attackers. So they went forward with three attackers here. The spacing was all off between midfield and attack here. And in this instance, when Chelsea were able to get the high press and get three players pressing high up the field, like Chelsea were able to do, they were able to pop that ball in over. And I think the interesting part here is you can see Chelsea's number 49 there, how high and wide he kept trying to target Conor Bradley. And they got in behind, and that's where they got their look from. Obviously, we've got 7 over here. It was Pedro Neto, also stayed high and wide, and they didn't keep any central player there. They just went high and wide in behind the two fullbacks, because you can see here that it's not a bad way that their back four is set up. It's quite a traditional way, but the two centre halves were very square on for the majority of the game. So look, you can see there is vast swathes of space there behind the defense, and that's not uncommon. When we look here to the Liverpool versus Manchester United game here, we can see a straight line in the midfield. A straight line here, essentially in the midfield, with absolutely no coverage here. A staggered centre half set up here between Konate and Virgil van Dijk. And essentially, you can see there is massive areas to play in behind both fullbacks there in this instance. And also we can see that the spacing here for their strikers was slightly off here as well. You've got a 3-man strike force here as well. And it's very evident that they were ceding ground here because of their straight line in midfield. Very easy to pop the ball over those fullbacks to on-running wingers here for Manchester United. And you can see the way Man United kept it very, very tight here as well, allowing them to break out into spaces, occupying the two centre halves. So they didn't really allow the two centre halves to get free at any real stage here. So became very congested in the middle because of the way Liverpool were playing. Man United ceded that kind of line in the middle of midfield there. You could see they basically stepped Bruno Fernandes past the line of Liverpool midfielders that were there, and then they played over the top towards their wingers and towards their overlapping fullback here, because they had so many men in here, 4, 18, 5, 2, 23. They were all there, and they were all able to marshal the diagonal line of the front three that Liverpool have here. When we move to Brentford, we see Brentford just basically kept everybody in the middle and broke out left and right. And what that allowed Brentford to do versus Liverpool here is you can see Liverpool's two strikers. They actually went with two strikers in this, like they did with us, I suppose, more so. Even though they were able to push people much further forward in the second half. So we can see that there's big gap between their two strikers. Not uncommon. Very, very traditional way of playing. They've packed the midfield here. What What Brentford decided to do, though, was they decided to build their defensive line along here to stop the ball getting into Cody Gakpo and to stop Kirkes going forward. And what they did then is they overloaded a lot of their players to Conor Bradley's side over here. So by chipping those balls forward, and Brentford played a lot of their balls down that left-hand side. So by chipping those balls forward over Bradley, who was the spacing between Bradley and Van Dijk here was slightly larger than it was against Aston Villa, and they were able to play into that position there. Now, what Villa did was kind of neither here nor there in this game yesterday. But the reason that it was neither here nor there was the defensive capability of Liverpool was stronger. So they had made a couple of tweaks. And the big tweak they made here was they kept Conor Bradley back further than he had been in the majority of the games that they had played previously. So we can see him here. He's right back there. He's staying at home in that traditional right back position. Slightly further back than he was against Chelsea, definitely further back than he was versus Man United, and certainly further back than slightly further back, should I say, than he was against Brentford. But they gave him a minder essentially inside there, because what Aston Villa did was Watkins went high and wide on that left-hand side to Conor Bradley, but the spacing between Villa's midfield and Ollie Watkins wasn't really there, and we had an absolute acreage of space over there on that left-hand side where we couldn't get players into, because Gesand had took back so far, and trying to bring Matty Cash up into that position just wasn't something we saw an awful lot, specifically in the second half. But Watkins really peeled off to that left-hand side, and all they did was they pulled the centre half over there, and we wanted to try and isolate Watkins with Conor Bradley, like Brentford did with Shade and Atwara, like Manchester United did in this instance here as well, by overloading with players here. And we wanted to do that, but we only had one man up there, and all they had to do was bring over a centre forward. And I know that some of these positions will be skewed because we were under pressure in the second half. But even when you look at it in the first half, yes, Rodgers was slightly further forward, but not by much. And we were so ingrained in having this defensive mentality, which, to be honest with you, when you go to Anfield and you're playing in Anfield, we've got such a poor record. I could see this was what our game plan was. Whether you agree with it or not, it was what our game plan was, and it was working until we conceded the first goal. But it was very difficult to break out of this formation and to move forward when we had such a spacing deficit here between Ollie Watkins and him trying to I suppose keep that left-hand side. I won't say keep it all on his own, but he was trying to occupy those two players there. He was ineffectual at it. It didn't work. He didn't get on the ball an awful lot. For a striker, you kind of would prefer to see him an awful lot more central, or at least have help up there. But he isolated himself out there, and he became no outlet for Aston Villa. We couldn't play the ball through him at all. And what we had to do was try and carry that ball through the middle, through Morgan Rodgers and through Gesand at times, and Onana as well when he carried that ball. So this area here became a problem for Aston Villa in the attacking sense. When we went 1-0 down, we certainly had no interest in packing in this area here either. And as you can see back here as well, that Aston Villa's kind of spacing here wasn't very great. But there's nothing major here. Like, we're clogging all the gaps here. Liverpool weren't running into these spaces, and anybody who was in this space here was duly marshalled by the two guys in Onana and Kamara. But the big issue here was we were toothless in attack, and really that's what everybody was talking about afterwards. Why didn't Villa go long? Well, Villa couldn't go long because of the way that they set up, with Ollie Watkins up top on his own, pulling out to that left-hand side, having nobody in this area over here to go over the fullback in this instance here. And Ollie Watkins was pretty much marshalled by Conor Bradley and by the centre half here, so that if we did go over this side, we didn't have enough people to get up in support or to get into the box quick enough outside of maybe the first 20-25 minutes of the game. So it's interesting when we look at things like this, and when we look at the average positional setups, and how Liverpool actually tweaked it was very simple. Liverpool went a hybrid of the way that they went, or played a kind of a hybrid, the way that they played against Manchester United and Brentford, and against Chelsea and against Brentford, and they pulled Conor Bradley back. They made sure that they put 2 men on Ollie Watkins in the defensive situation so that we couldn't get the ball to him, or if we did, that he was going to be dealt with. Made sure that he was pulled out to that left-hand side. So even if you played balls up and you were going to get second balls and they were going to be knocked on or try to get flick-ons, or Liverpool won't be able to deal with the straight ball forward, you're out on that sideline and you almost have an extra defender out there, because the sideline is a defender for the defending team as well. And I think that made a big difference to the way Villa played. We didn't play tactically. We didn't want to play an awful lot of long balls, but when we did, the outlet wasn't there because of the way that we had set up and because of the way that they were able to funnel Ollie Watkins into that situation there. So that's something that needs to be highlighted. And look, as I said, the context behind that as well is we were in defensive shell pretty much for the whole lot of that first half, and that was the way we were supposed to be. We were supposed to be in a defensive shell and break on the counter and carry that ball through. And it worked for 45 minutes, and then on the 46th minute we concede, and then it was very difficult to continue to play that game plan where Liverpool could just pass that ball around in the middle of midfield and be safe in the knowledge that the last time they lost from having I think it was mentioned on the broadcast, was last time that they lost from having a 1-0 lead was at home, that is, was against Crystal Palace. I think they said in 2017. So formidable record for Liverpool when they go ahead at home. And Aston Villa didn't have any answers after they went 1-0 behind. So bit longer than the 8 minutes that we normally do for Villa AM, and this is by no means a conclusive study into the tactics. It's just something that I noticed during the game where Conor Bradley was setting up was different to how he set up against like I saw the Chelsea game, I saw the Man United game, and I noticed that it was different in how he set up in both of those games, or how Liverpool set up specifically in both of those games. And you have to say it worked. It stopped them from him being targeted down that side, and they funneled all their play over to our left-hand side. So when we were, it was very difficult for us to get chip balls over that left-hand side, and we didn't have men far enough up the field. So they dragged back our attackers in that instance, and they made us defend, I suppose, our right-hand side of the field as well, while also nullifying our left-hand side of the field by creating the spacing differences between Watkins and our midfield through Conor Bradley and through their centre-halves as well there. So, look, something to be aware of. Cold-lighted day is always better than a loss. I was very, very critical after the game. I'm still not happy at the way the game panned out, but look, c'est la vie. We've got Tel Aviv on Thursday. We've got we've got Bournemouth at the weekend. We just have to get back up on the horse and rectify a few things. Got to get this team scoring. That is the big issue, and hopefully we see that on Thursday. Thanks so much, everybody. Apologies for the delay in the middle of the podcast there with some technical issues, but stay safe, stay healthy, and all that's left to say is up the Villa.